Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is the Banned Books Podcast, episode number 180 something. Number 88?
Mm-hmm. 188.
Nice. Yep. There we go. Coming up on 200. We are your hosts, Christopher Gillespie.
I actually think we're coming up on 250,000 downloads as well.
Are we really? Okay,
Yeah,
well thank you everybody for tolerating us this long and doing that.
Well, and now, I mentioned it because now in the social media, what do we want to call it? Catastrophe, crisis? Purge?
Putsch? How about putsch?
Somebody asked, like, what do we do now? And I said, we do the same thing we always did, which is you email it, you print off the URLs. I don't know.
Right.
Just word of mouth, tell people about it, send them links. For now, you can still email and text without it being censored. I did see Mozilla Foundation said that they were going to start censoring URLs in Firefox.
Correct. Yeah.
So that might get to be a challenge at some point, but
well, it's going to be a challenge until people wake up to the fact that the Republic no longer stands and we have a different form of governance, and therefore it's up to us as citizens to basically stay connected to each other and stop relying on outside sources and outside forces to connect us.
Right. I know it's been used kind of in a conspiratorial way, the whole red pill thing and quoting the Matrix and whatever, which I'm never really comfortable with because I know of where the Wachowskis ended up after that.
Well, I was going to say the whole movie is actually an analogy and a justification for them having a sex change.
Right, exactly.
They've had as much as admitted it in interviews.
Right,
so.
Exactly. But this is a bit of a red pill moment where we recognize that the people in charge and the way things have been working aren't the way you think they have been, right?
Right.
Like we find out that, like media companies collude onto stories to decide which stories they should promote and which ones they should demote.
Well, they also collude with the intelligence community.
Right.
The FBI and the CIA, they're open about it now.
Well, they've been doing that since at least 60s, 70s.
60s, I was going to say, with Operation Mockingbird.
Right, exactly.
Which, by the way, is still running. I don't know why people think they just locked that one away in a closet and said, well, we tried.
Because Wikipedia said so.
Right, there we go. I was going to say, that's like saying that DARPA didn't continue after they shut it down.
Well, I was watching a new channel to me, and I think I told you about it. It's called Dark Ops. I just found
it on YouTube?
Yeah, I was just looking for one of these operations or something, and so I Googled it, and YouTube brought up this channel, and they were talking about this one during Vietnam where they drop all these sonar basically devices in the ground, and they look like undetonated bombs. They're camouflaged. And then they were sending them up to airplanes that were receiving the radio, and then to two supercomputers that they had brought over from the States, and they were, I don't know where they were, Hanoi or somewhere. And they were doing this in the 70s, but the comment at the beginning was like, it's usually known as Operation Ice something, I can't remember what. And then he said, but it also has gone by, and then he listed off about 18 names.
Right.
So you're like, so it's really hard to track some of this stuff down because they keep changing the code name.
That's kind of the point.
They don't want you to know about it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the world we live in. It's the world we've always lived in, actually, in modern times. It's just that with the advent of the internet and mass communication on a scale that we've never known before, people's ability to access information, if they're willing to do a little bit of work, right? We've talked about this before, and even in relation to the subject of this show, or the subject matter of this show, is that curiosity, for example. I see this with my kids. I'm sure you see this with your own kids, is that like Leonardo da Vinci said that every child is born an artist until that is basically beaten out of them by adults. Likewise, I've never met anyone who wasn't curious by nature, who was essentially taught to not be curious over time. And that if you lose your curiosity, you more and more rely on others to supply information to you. How to think, how to speak, how to act.
Lewis and Tolkien probably about, regaining our sense of wonder.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and I've talked about it quite often the last couple of years in relation to just metaphysics in general.
Sure.
That we've arrived at a point where not only can we not talk about God anymore, but we can't even talk about objective truth or objective morality or simply the presence of anything that is outside our five senses.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, the way people talk about going to Mars, and they're like, that's a big waste of money. And I'm like, why?
Right. As opposed to
let's go check it out. Well, yeah, that's true.
Right.
Like sending how much money to Pakistan for gender training?
That's a money laundering scheme. That all got exposed.
It has to be. It has to be.
No, that got exposed at least a week and a half ago, that all of the billions that are going overseas for the different projects, it's all money laundering for the people that appropriate the money.
Right.
This is what I mean about curiosity.
Why can't we just assume that anyway?
But if you're just slightly curious and you start to track the receipts and follow the money, in this case to Pakistan and gender studies, and you find out that that's far more money than this program needs or requires.
Right.
And especially the university system that it's being used in and appropriated for. And then you follow the money even further and find out that the money is actually coming back this direction.
Right.
Then you understand, you're laundering money through Pakistani universities.
You remember when it used to be a controversy, like with Halliburton? But
yeah, right.
Not really anymore.
No, the top's off the jar and everything. It's like Pandora's box. Everything is pouring out now. And as you and I have discussed, they don't care anymore because they don't need to pretend. The cat's out of the bag. Like we were just saying, the Joint Chiefs and the intelligence community are the government. They don't need to hide anymore because what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Nothing.
Well, we could try to, we can't vote him out of office.
No, exactly. It's like I said, America is a giant convenience store. That's all it is now. And
those are actually career politicians, and they don't even have to affect the vote for it to happen.
They're middle management. They're bought and paid for. They're just the mouthpiece to give us the illusion that our vote counts, to quote George Carlin.
Are we being depressing here? I think we are.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just it's pragmatism. That's what I'm saying. I'm just looking at it, and granted, for the full disclosure, the medicine that they gave me after my surgery is causing me to be disoriented and confused, and I lose a feeling in my extremities. So I'm concentrating at an extremely high level right now to keep focused. But
that's okay. You can just let me talk about whatever nonsense I talk about.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is most people, I'm sure, will be like, Riley, you sound like you do always. The point being that we know all this. And the reason that we know all this is because we're curious and because we know people. You and I both know people who scrape the internet. I know people in the intelligence community. I know people who work in government positions, right? Even at the top most level, oddly, because that's how weird my life has become. And a lot of the stuff that I discover or that you find, I actually fact check it with people who actually know what's going on. And they say, yeah, we know this. We're aware of this.
We're not talking about what might be counter, what do we call these? Cointel, the
counterintelligence kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think Pizzagate to some degree is that. I mean, is there a large child trafficking rings? Are many of them?
100%.
Yeah, of course.
Numerous.
The whole is it operating out of a pizza place in Oregon? I'm not so sure that was. I think that was a distraction. But anyway,
right. Well, it's a honeypot.
Yeah,
it's probably a honeypot more than anything.
Exactly.
Well,
that's the problem because they did this. They for example. Well, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but. To draw people that are prone to maybe less rational behavior.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Create forums and groups in various places and use bots and other, and actors to drum them up. I mean, I was talking to someone this morning about I was talking about on our morning devotion about how easy it is for us to forget history. And for one, I mean, recent history. So we had the bombing in Nashville.
Twice.
Who's even talking about that? Right. But what about the faked attempt at a coup with Governor Whitmer, right? And then it was revealed that the lead guy was an FBI informant, the guy who drummed up the whole thing.
Yeah.
So he worked for the FBI. So wait a minute. That means the FBI paid to have a staged coup attempt of a governor.
Right.
That's not conspiracy. It was reported.
No. This happens all the time, by the way, in drug enforcement, for example, where the DEA and then local vice, they're both undercover, but in opposite gangs, and they both set up a drug deal simultaneously, and then the only people that are at the drug deal are either DEA agents or cops.
They get the drugs and the money.
Right. And it's like, are there any outlaws here? No? Oh, okay. Our bad. Unless you're like those two CIA agents that were actually running a drug cartel out of Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
In the 2000s.
Right.
Excuse me. But this is the point then, is that you can either, and to your point then, you can either trust history or you can trust your government, but you can't do both.
I think that's right. Well, you can't really trust even your perception of events because those are being fed by actors, right? I mean,
Right.
Whether it's news media, I mean, it's always filtered. Everything's filtered.
Right.
This is what and I was thinking maybe as a parallel to Scripture, which sometimes happens, right? The way that Jesus refers to the Pharisees, who are the government, effectively. They're religious government, but they're still government. He calls them whitewashed tombs.
Yeah.
So outwardly, they look great. They have a forward-facing kind of, behavior, activity. This is how people understand them. I think people respected them. I think they're a little afraid of them, right?
Right.
But inwardly, they're dead, right? It's just a cover. It's just a cover for what's going on behind the surface. And it seems like the things that are presented to us as, the plebes, is the outward-facing narrative is one thing.
Yeah.
And then but then of course, it's far more complicated than that. Because like right now, we're dealing with our situation here in this country as a national issue, but it's not a national issue. It's an international issue.
Correct.
Every major world government has some stake in what's happening here.
Right. Because the Chinese Communist government is trying to actually infiltrate most of Western society.
Well, I don't doubt the Russians are collaborating and working with that. And there's others that are working against it. I mean, like, how would you ever tease out all the threads and see, unless it is like we were saying, if it is just chaos and there's people trying to bring some order to it, but it's really kind of spiraling out of control.
Correct. If you want to understand how this works at the most fundamental level, a book that's been very helpful to me over the years, it's by Neil Postman, and it's entitled How to Watch TV News.
Yeah, that's right.
Where he breaks this all down in relation to not only CNN, which at the time of the writing of the book was, the only, really the big one. There was CNN and Fox News, I think, were kind of the two big media network conglomerates.
So this was towards the end of his life then.
Yeah. Okay. But also he breaks down local news as well and says, it's not just CNN and Fox that are perpetrators of this. Local news does it.
You've seen those clips where they superimpose all the local news channels and they end up saying exactly the same thing. They have the same script.
Yeah, no, I've posted that several times on social media. It's coordinated. It's a campaign of information, misinformation, possibly propaganda, possibly.
1992.
So then what does the church do? Because I brought this up last week. I'm sure you brought this up last week in church, in the sermon, in Bible studies. The history of Western the history of human civilization has been largely authoritarian government. There's only been moments of democracy, liberty in the history of government. By and large, most government for most of human civilization has been authoritarian, monarchical, autocratic.
Read the Bible.
Right. Likewise, then, for most of Christian history, the history of the church is the history of persecution and affliction. And then moments of peace. And I think what's screwed us up, because I was just talking with somebody yesterday about the history of Israel and the Jewish identity is a history of persecution. Right. Which is why Israel right now is very much like, no, you're not coming in here. You're not doing this. This ain't happening here. Not only in the Middle East, but just broadly speaking, Israel's always prepared to protect themselves because their kind of motto is never again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas the history of the church, because of Christendom, I think, have been lulled into a sense of privilege and luxury. And especially in the last 5 or 6 generations in the United States, in our context, we have been deluded into believing that we are special and that we enjoy a place of pride within society. And now we don't. And I even had a question from a pastor yesterday who texted me asking, what evidence do I have that this year is going to lead to greater persecution of the church in this country?
Sorry.
And I'm to your point about perception, is that maybe where you live, for you and I, we live semi-rural areas or a little bit off the beaten path. And so realistically, you could look around and observe, hey, things are pretty much status quo as far as that goes.
Yep.
But that's because we're off the beaten path, and it will find us. It will just find us perhaps a little bit later than it will find big city churches.
But it's like a snowball, right? I mean, once it starts getting momentum, or freight train, good luck stopping it at that point. Right. Yeah.
The plan is, the tent pegs here are destroy history, destroy economy, destroy family, destroy religion. These are the 4 points of attack for communism. And we're going through the color revolution now. We went through the people's revolution already. We've gone through a youth revolution, just like happened in China in the 50s and 60s. And it's not going to stop. In fact, it's picking up momentum just in the last week of us recording this, or since before we recorded this. Look at all of the bills and amendments. Look at everything that's happened with big tech, and not only deleting accounts on social media, but now they're deleting websites. They're deleting URLs. That's just a week. This is not going to slow down. By spring, you're not even going to recognize our society.
Yeah.
Whatever you thought was bad about society last spring with COVID, multiply that times like 10. That's what's coming. I know this because it's already been pre-planned and outlined, and people have hacked it and released it onto the internet. We know their plans, but like we've said, they don't care that we know our plans because we're impotent to stop them.
Right.
So then what do you do locally? What do you do as a Christian in your congregation and in your community when you know persecution's coming? And you know it's going to be severe, such as travel restrictions, such as there's just certain places you're not going to be allowed to go unless you comply with guidelines. What if, for example, as has already happened in my state, the governor says you can't go to church unless you abide by these guidelines? Or in your state, you're not allowed to sing in your churches.
Yeah.
Are you going to, what are you going to do? Because the rule of law no longer applies, so we can't say it's not a law, so you don't have to abide by it as a mandate. Well, there is no rule of law anymore. The law doesn't apply because there's no one to enforce the law equitably.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what do? Do you obey or do you disobey?
It's a hard question, isn't it? Especially when the internet's
I'm just throwing it out there. When you lay in hospital beds, you have a lot of time to think.
Maybe.
Which, by the way, as a side note, I've been in 2 hospitals since Christmas, and both of them were empty. The ICUs were empty. The operating rooms were empty. Pre-op was empty. They were empty. Staff is cut by half. There's whole floors of the hospitals that I was staying in that are dark. They're just, the lights are shut off and there's nobody staffing those.
Wow.
Empty. It's amazing. Wow. So whatever you're being told, maybe in your area the hospitals are full, but in Minneapolis, the busiest hospital in Twin Cities, empty. And I for myself, and I'm saying this for the sake of transparency, I'm just done. I'm done being patient with people. I'm done coddling people, and I'm done listening to people. I don't even know how to say it. I know I sound intolerant, and I know I sound like I'm not being very loving or charitable. And yes, probably I don't know anymore, because this is, I think, the bigger topic is, what does it even mean to love our neighbor anymore? And
I can't
to
even hear
what
any questions
extent,
here. I keep dropping out.
I was going to say, what does it even mean to love our neighbor
Just keep
anymore?
going.
And
just keep going.
Well, and to what extent then, it's like I teach that honesty without love is brutality, right? But love without honesty is sentimentality. And so you're always striving to hold that tension between being honest, but also being loving and being charitable with the level of honesty that you're injecting into a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's no roadmap or method to walk the straight path between honesty and love. You're always going to be falling off into one ditch or the other ditch. But at least where I'm at, because of just the egregious amount of prejudice that has been brought to bear on me and my family by churches, by businesses, and by people in general, because we refuse to abide by the guidelines unless we absolutely have to, and to watch others comply and not only give in to the guidelines, but promote them. I see this, especially for the churches, I see this leading us to a very, very dark place, because it seems more and more like the churches are a reflection of the culture. and they're not standing up and preaching the law at the culture.
Right.
And calling a thing what it is, calling a spade, and calling out evil, and calling out maliciousness and malevolence, and calling out immorality and unethical behavior. It's almost as if what matters most is simply surviving and getting along. So let's just get along to go along. And as a consequence, we'll compromise, but then we'll say that we're compromising for the sake of the gospel.
Yeah.
And that's where people are losing me, is that they're using the gospel as an excuse to compromise with culture. And I think that's where the real danger is at.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer, obviously, other than fight until I can't fight anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult to be a pastor now because obviously so many people in my congregation are trying to figure their way through it. And when they come to me for advice, they don't like my advice, which is fight. You have to fight. You have to be smart. You have to be wise.
Right.
And you have to do what's necessary to protect yourself and preserve your family.
I think so.
But
what does that look like, right? I mean, that's always the question.
Right.
Well, I think, keeping the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
What you got worth living for, That's the question.
Right. Well, where's Christ?
Right, exactly. And I think, that was my sermon. And I feel like, I think I intuitively know that that's not the priority for many people.
Right. It's not convenient.
Well, they have not even 1 foot in the church. They've got their little toe in the church, right. and the rest of their life they live independent of faith in Christ. And it's not a good place to be, because it doesn't take much then to just fall off, into the abyss.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just, I should, maybe to correct myself, I'm tired of everybody being nice.
Yeah.
As if nice and love are synonymous.
Did you see it was Elon Musk posted a tweet, let's make comedy legal again. Yeah. And I think he's right. We've lost our sense of, if we can't laugh at ourselves, if we can't laugh at this situation.
Right.
It's just no way to go through life.
No, it's true. I've actually struggled with that the last month or so. Getting upset with people who are memeing about the COVID guidelines and memeing about the elections and making a joke of it. Mm-hmm. And for myself asking, well, should we be making fun of this, or should we be taking this much more seriously than we are?
Yeah.
Or is it both? Is it both and?
It's kind of like, Life of Brian, right? Monty Python?
Yeah.
I mean, he's hanging on the cross, always look on the bright side of life.
Right. Well, and that goes to the point too, right, of Christians I talk to say, yeah, everything will be fine in the end because Jesus is still risen.
True.
Okay, so now what do I do today?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, just trust that Jesus is risen. Okay, but what about now? What do I do? Should I just allow myself to be injected with an untested drug that changes my RNA because Jesus is risen?
We've teased this out in many episodes, but it's a fundamental denial of vocation, that God has called you to this place and this time.
Right.
And he's put you in a particular place in life, whether it's as parents or, husband or wife, or in our case as pastors. I mean, whatever it is, we're ultimately citizens. And you mentioned this, that the American experiment is so profoundly unique,
right,
that we don't even know what we're losing.
Right.
Because we have not yet begun to understand what it is to have a truly, grassroots Constitution. I mean, the Constitution is meant to communicate this. Obviously, it didn't prevent every issue. It did not foresee the internet, for example.
Sure.
Mass communication, although I think it had some sense of press, but not nearly as what we're seeing today.
Right. Well, who could have predicted this even 10 years ago?
I mean, the Constitution, as well as the Federalist Papers, reject the idea of having standing armies.
Right.
And
taxes.
Well, I know. But actually, the military complex that includes the intelligence agencies are standing.
It does.
It's a standing army. It's an intelligence army, but it's using that kind of warfare.
Right.
The fourth generation, I guess, is what they call it.
Sure. Everything went downhill starting in 1913, let's be honest. Federal Reserve.
Don't let a crisis go to waste.
That's right. So this is then kind of the cornerstone of this conversation that we started before I got sick with the sermon from Communism in the Churches from 1960. So this is nothing new either. It's not as if you and I are somehow Johnny-come-latelys with this stuff. This has been around for decades, since at least, well, actually the 20s, and even a little bit before that.
Yeah, I mentioned in the last episode that there's I don't think I linked to it now that I say it, the CFW Walther critique of communism. He's the founder of our church body. Old guy, this is a long time ago. Yeah. But he was offering criticism of it, during the Russian Revolution. So
it's true. So this is a continuation of that sermon about religion as an extra and about propaganda, which is why we were talking about what we talked about by way of introduction to this. Who, again, the author of this preacher is Bishop Gerald Kennedy. Excuse me. Religion is an extra. Scroll down to it. There we go.
I'm going to try to put it up on the screen here for the video. It
says, that is to say, it is not part of the essential curriculum of life, but one of those courses offered for people who have extra time or special interest. That is, another communist belief is that religion is an extra. And therefore, it's something you take as an elective at school, comparative religious studies, for example.
They present it as an extra, but they understand that it's actually at this heart.
Correct.
Of society. Okay.
Correct. I have a friend who teaches at a girls' college. Because of the modern strenuous life, they have a course called Rest. For an hour, twice a week, a girl can get a small credit for simply taking a nap under supervision, which, by the way, is creepy. I think it's creepy. Go lay down and take a nap, and we will watch you. And for those who think they might enjoy it, perhaps it should be allowed.
I think we called that study hall, but anyway.
Right? I was going to say, I called that study hall. Yeah. Can I have a pass to go to the library?
Take a nap.
I was looking at the great Volga Dam outside Stalingrad one day and listened to a young man describe its wonders. It is a magnificent sight and will produce tremendous electrical power. He was proud of it, and his eyes shone. Look at it, he said. Why do we need God?
Whoa.
There you go.
Tower of Babel.
I was going to say that intensified quickly.
It's pretty big. That's impressive.
Right? Yeah. That escalated quickly. Now that same spirit has entered into us. And I think that's a key word, right? Spirit. This goes to my point about, even in the churches, we don't necessarily have a sober conversation about powers and principalities, spirits.
The spiritual, yes.
The spiritual realm, right? That we talk about angels and demons, for example. But we tend to psychologize these things. We tend to frame them in therapeutic language versus, as Dr. Luther says at the end of The Bondage of the Will, one demon is stronger than all of the men on earth combined.
Wow. That's a good quote.
Right? That's a different kind of attitude about metaphysics and about the spiritual realm. Also, modern man, in my opinion, assumes that we pretty much know everything there is to know about everything, and what we don't know, we'll know eventually.
Right. Versus
pre-modern man assumes we actually don't really know anything about anything, and the little that we do know doesn't really help us that much.
Well, I'm also struck by, that statement about why do we need God? And, I think it's a tradition. Well, no, I don't think so. I think it's a reflection on the scripture. It's a tradition that comes out of the scripture, and that we give thanks to God in all things. So even when we do make this impressive, a hydroelectric plant that's a dam, who do we give credit to for it? If we credit ourselves, we made ourselves out to be God. Right. So it isn't that we're being a-religious. We're being, quite religious in a sense of who do we worship? It's just the worship is turned inward. Right.
St. Augustine said that we confuse the fruit with the one who gives it.
Right.
Is that we hold the fruit in our hand and we say, look what I've done. Kind of like little Jack Horner pulls out the plum and says, what a good boy am I? Rather than say, well, okay, but who provided the fruit for you? Who gave you the seed?
By the way, this is you and I expressing the need for humility.
A lot of humility, yes.
We may not always come off as the most humble people in the world. Okay, acknowledge that.
Sure. Well, yeah. There's a difference between humility and timidity.
Right.
I think that's also been lost.
I think, we need to express this, that humility, it's humility before God, right? We humble ourselves
Right.
before the Word of God, before, the Son of
Right.
God, right? So we receive His Word in humility, recognizing that
Right.
it is the authority, right?
Right.
We don't have authority over it; it has authority over
Correct.
us, right? Whereas before one another, that's not the way that we relate to each other in humility. I mean, it is true that Jesus says we should serve each other, right? But what does that service look like? Well,
Right.
sometimes it means like a parent tells the child, "Cut it out." Is that the
sure.
parent not being humble?
Right.
I mean, he's humbled under God's word, under the
Right.
mandate of his vocation.
Right.
But humbled before the child? I mean,
Right.
sometimes that happens when the child points out your sin. I get that. And you confess.
Use an example that's happened to me anecdotally is that, well, as a side note too, at least in the upper Midwest, I've experienced this the last 2+ decades, that confidence, for example, is almost considered a venial sin
Isn't that
in the
something?
churches.
Yeah.
And courage, you can have quiet courage. You can have the courage to endure, but it can't be explicit. It can't be blatant courage. It can't be, fist in the air kind of courage. That's considered a sin too, a vice. But to the point then, when I started training martial arts and quickly realized that everybody in the room could murder me whenever they felt like it. And up to that point, I liked to think of myself as at least a tough person. Not maybe physically tough, but just tough in a mental sense or a personality sense. And then to be in a room with people who at any moment could just grab a hold of me and that would be it. I'm done.
Yep.
That's humbling because you realize in that context, in that ecosystem, you are of no importance whatsoever unless they decide you matter. It's just
Right.
that simple. If you speak up and they say, shut up, you don't have anything to say.
Nope.
You better shut up because
Right.
you're not important. And they have proven that both physically and intellectually. So for them to say, we welcome you into our fellowship, we welcome you onto our team, we want to teach you, we want you to learn what we've learned. We're going to do this in a way that doesn't result in you having, gross bodily injury or dying.
Right.
There is an immense amount of gratitude that comes out of you
That's
toward
humbling.
these people.
That's humbling.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that the humility comes to this day for me in knowing these people are superior to me, and in many ways, and yet they honor me with their kindness, with their courage, with their love and charity, with what they share with me, with like I said, their kindness, their empathy, and to compare that in a very small way, though, in relation to God, then that especially as a convert, I wasn't looking for Jesus; He came looking for me. And then after the fact, recognizing, had I died at 22, I would be in hell. And that I am not more important than anybody else who's ever existed in or outside the church. And that I'm no better or worse than anybody that God's created. That's why he says, right, with God, there's, he shows no partiality.
Right.
And yet he chose me. He chose me. Not only chose to save me, but he chose to make me. And for me, it always goes back to that root. He made me. I don't have to exist. He chose to let me exist through his word. Therefore, I'm not important in and of myself. I'm only important to the extent that God himself acknowledges me and says, you're important because I made you and I redeemed you. And in relation to me, because I say you're important, you matter, you're loved, you matter. That's why people without Christ are always struggling to find that word that says to them, you matter, but not conditionally, unconditionally, which is why all other words fall short. Because in the end, in a room full of people that can murder you, for example, that's a conditional thing. It's contingent on merit, for example. It's a merit-based system. You get out what you put in. Versus with God, it's not merit-based. It's gift-based. It's sacramental.
You have all those words, right? Gracious, merciful, kind, steadfast, loving kindness.
Right.
Yeah.
Why? Because I want to. But what have I done to deserve this? Nothing. I just did it because I love you. But why do you love me?
An unconditional relationship? A non-transactional relationship?
Yes.
I've never seen such a thing.
That's the key point, is that, in my opinion, Only an unconditional, non-transactional relationship can truly humble you to the core, because it reaches all the way back to, you don't deserve this. It's a gift. I gave it to you. You don't deserve to exist, but I chose to make you.
And that's a unique spirit that's not found in the world.
100%. I haven't found it yet anyways.
Well, I wouldn't expect to. I mean, it only comes through that word.
Right.
The promise.
And so you can be confident, but you can also be extremely confident in the fact that you don't know anything, or that you know less than a fragment of everything there is to know for you, wherever you find yourself located in your vocation. Not even like talking about the rest of the universe, just in your life itself and the very finite boundaries of your life. Yeah. You know so little about yourself. It's like I've talked with friends and teammates. It's one thing to accept that people outside of you are outside of your control, and that events outside of you are outside of your control. Mm-hmm. But when your own body betrays you, it's a weird thing, especially for me, because I depend on my body so much. And to have it betray me in this way, and then keep betraying me, it's hard for me to actually go back and do the things that I was doing a month ago, because I'm afraid of how my body's going to react to that stress. And so it's not so much the physical limitations that this illness has imposed upon me, it's the mental ones.
So maybe you were a little delusional as to the symbiotic relationship you had between your mind and your body?
You get a little ahead of yourself. You get a little ahead of yourself.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I was going to say this, that courage can be delusion, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So, for example,
the charge of the light brigade kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Teddy Roosevelt charging up Bunker Hill. It's like, dude, you don't charge uphill. That's not how this works.
I was thinking in terms of then, our faith is courage, but with confidence, because we have a promise, we have hope.
Right.
Right. And, to have courage in the face of hopelessness. I mean, just imagine, you just watch any war movie, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, the odds are insurmountable. Well, how do you
watch 1917 yet?
I did.
Okay. I just saw a clip the other day, and I was like, oh, I have to own this. Like, I haven't even watched the movie yet, and I already decided, I'm like, I have to own this movie.
It didn't get a lot of good press.
Yeah.
Because I think they didn't understand that it's trying to draw together a bunch of narratives in a fictional way. But the narratives are true individually, but collectively it's not. But it's to give you an insight into what it's like to be this courier that has to run through all of these, from all these
But speaking of courage.
Well, and the problem with the film, I'm not going to spoil anything here. I think. Let me think if I'm going to spoil anything.
Spoiler alert.
No, because we talked before we went on air. We were talking about the deceit of film, and in this case, it's the deceit of the confidence of the watcher that they know where things are going. Right. And not every film plays with that. Some do, where you think you understand what's happening and where this is going, and you're writing the script out ahead, and then, but it never follows the script.
Correct.
And that's the fog of war. I think it really does communicate that well. That you have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
You can try to write all the possibilities, but all it takes is one event or one word, and it takes a left turn. And this is life. I mean, this happens in life all the time. Right. They're like, really? I mean, if I had just, it would have been totally different, follow through, good or ill, right? Yeah, so it does communicate that. 1917. Who was the director? That's
Sam Mendes.
That's right.
The cinematography, though, and the art direction.
It's brilliant.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, do you watch the making of stuff? Where they
Not yet, because I don't want to ruin the rest of it. I just saw the scene where there's a group of soldiers sitting in the woods, and the one soldier's in the middle singing.
Oh, yeah.
And the camera goes around in a circle through the soldiers.
Right.
And you realize
in the forest,
there's a cameraman walking with this camera, and yet doing it in such a way that just the visual narrative setup for that one scene.
Yeah,
I was just in awe of the filmmaking, the talent that's on display right there.
Oh yeah, no, it's visually engaging. What was I going to say? The other aspect of it? No, I lost it. Never mind.
Sorry, I interrupted you. That was my
That's
bad.
Okay. Sorry.
But the spirit of atheism has entered into us. Let's just put it that way, bluntly. The spirit of communism is the spirit of atheism. It's the spirit of godlessness.
Yeah, it's a false spirit. It would be a demonic spirit then.
It is a demonic spirit. We put great emphasis on the beauty of our cathedrals and the beauty of our services. We could probably devote an entire podcast to that one sentence.
Wow.
Because the temptation.
Well, I was thinking of Michael Malice. He describes the whole political, economic, tech, military, complex as the cathedral.
Exactly. Right.
And because he's wanting to point out the religious ideology that they subscribe to and pursue dogmatically.
I was a guest of 2 cathedrals, 2 temples of COVID in the last month, and I would say this, as someone who has spent an inordinate amount of time studying religion, the cult mentality and dogmatic mentality and zealotry on display at the hospitals is remarkable. Someone needs to do a study of this, because it is remarkable to me, the religious spirit that has fallen upon these hospitals. It was always there, by the way. We've treated doctors for a very long time as if they're prophets.
Yeah, and that's what I wondered. It doesn't seem like it was that hard to step into it.
No.
If we weren't already there.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I've had conversations with my doctors, and here's some data. Nope.
They're not David-driven. No.
All you've done is proven that you're a heretic. That's essentially what it comes down to. For them, me saying, well, the data says this, and this scientific study by this virology team over here has said this, and this is what we've concluded about masks, and this is what we concluded about lockdowns, and this is what we concluded about vaccinations, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, nope. Like I've said to you, I've had to explain the PCR test to people in the hospitals who are trying to administer it to me. And their answer in the end is, well, if you don't get this, you can't have your procedure. I'm like, that's rather dogmatic of you.
Mm-hmm.
That you won't listen to reason.
They can't live in the tension, and there's a few reasons for it.
Yes.
I think the first one is that they can't second guess decisions. Sure. So they follow a script because it saves you from that tension, that daily conflict between reality.
Was it Malice who said it saves you from the moral responsibility of your decisions?
Well, and that's where I was going to go with it. I think that's right, whether he said it or not.
Yeah.
In that, if you're following procedure, then you avoid malpractice.
Well, I did have to sign a waiver now, and for my surgery on Monday.
Really?
That was the last page of all the stuff that I had to sign off on. I had to acknowledge that there are risks associated with anesthesia and the operation.
Wow.
And we get to the last page, and she said, just sign here. And I go, is this so that I can't sue you if I get COVID? And she said, yeah. The nurse said that. I said, that is truly sad and unfortunate that this is where we're at. That I have to sign a waiver that says if I get the flu, I won't sue you.
Or, it's a coronavirus, so it's cold.
Yeah.
A very severe cold.
Don't say that.
I'm sorry.
Stage 4 cold.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I might get banned from YouTube. That's my goal in life now.
It's a stage 4 cold. Yes. Well, both of us.
To get banned from platforms.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
But nonetheless, I thought, well, how sad is it? Again, we're so litigious as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have time to follow up with it because I really wanted to have a conversation with her because she was a great nurse.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have the conversation, because of her anecdotal experience, to say how much of this is driven by insurance and administration worries rather than actual data.
I saw that somebody who was, I don't even think they were there as a participant. I think they were reporting on the Capitol protest.
Yeah.
Or rally or a riot or whatever you want to call it, I guess. Depends on who you ask, right? That they were dropped by their insurance because they're now high risk.
Sure.
Because you were at a political protest, you're now high risk?
You were at the wrong kind of political protest. As was proven last summer, you can be at certain protests. Those don't spread. Those aren't super spreaders.
Now, in hindsight, you could arguably say you were endangering your life or well-being, I guess. But you can't walk out the door either. So,
right.
Okay.
Or stay home. So,
isn't that ultimately what we're being taught?
Yes.
It's just...
Yeah. It's nihilism.
Stay in your state. Yeah. Can't cross state lines. Can't cross into other countries.
If you want to know what the end state of godlessness is, you're witnessing it in real time. That's the sad reality of this.
It's the destruction of community. Right?
Right. It's the utter destruction of human beings, of humanity. It's the destruction of our humanity because like we've talked about with freedom, your humanity is actually given to you by God.
Yeah.
So take God out, and humanity essentially just deteriorates into, well, what do you think you are today? Or what do you think about other people? What is the dignity of human beings?
My fifth of 6 strikes on Facebook, so I'm 1 strike away from I don't know if it's a 30-day ban or I don't know what. I'm not anxious to find out. But it was for sharing the Project Veritas video of the council for the PBS.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch that one?
Yes.
To speak about somebody who refers to a whole group of people in human terms. That's the video.
Right.
Like, really? Oh, re-education camps, taking you away from your parents.
Right.
Throwing Molotov cocktails at you because they don't like you.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I mean, one, it's dogmatic ideology, but it's also, it's treating a whole population group as inhuman. I think that was actually what civil rights movement was about, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And you were for that.
Intellectually, apparently.
Intellectually, yes. Not practically.
Fact. So we put great emphasis on the beauty of our cathedrals, the beauty of our services. This is a temptation to sin that we've talked about on this program, both anecdotally, both of us.
We love this stuff. We love it.
Yes.
And we know that it's dangerous.
I was going to say, I appreciate it. I don't know if I'd say I love it.
Oh, I do. I love going into this
because I think the artist in me doesn't like the gaudiness of it.
Oh, all the columns. I like all the columns.
Well,
no,
the way
it's
well, no, I mean the architecture. Sure, the architecture is amazing. The cathedral architecture. No, that's amazing stuff. The services.
Oh, yeah. You are as Scandinavian as it gets. I mean, you're a minimalist if there ever is one.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, it's so weird that I did go to art school, and yet at the same time, I do prefer minimalism. Although I'm an abstract expressionist by training, which is weird too.
Yeah, I would say, like, if you walk into what is it, Rococo, that style of architecture.
Yeah.
Even me, who I like beautiful things, I'm like, this is a little bit like going into what, like an antique store.
Right.
Like, there's stuff everywhere, and it doesn't really all belong together.
No.
I'm not really sure what's going on here.
No, it's like a spiritual hyperactive was set loose with a box of crayons.
It's like, oh, look, there's another cherub. Boy, he's fat.
Exactly. Right. Can never have enough.
I guess.
So yes, we do this. It's a temptation, again, just like we talked about, to not only confuse the gift with the giver, but also to continue to confuse the places that we gather to give thanks and praise to the giver for the gifts.
Right.
So we talk about worship as if it were only relaxation and aesthetic enjoyment. Again, he said this in 1960.
And he's a Methodist.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, sorry to all of our Methodist friends out there. We're not knocking you. It's just the Methodism as a tradition, not a lot of flying buttresses in that tradition. Not a lot of gaudy art.
Well, a lot has changed in the Methodist, among the Methodist Church in the U.S. since 1960.
Yes, that's true too.
Yeah, it's a very different church today.
Our appeal is often made on the basis of the value of a change of a pace and the satisfaction of sitting in a restful environment for an hour. Okay. We're never going to get through this episode because this is such good stuff and we haven't talked in a couple weeks. This change of pace and the satisfaction of sitting in a restful environment for an hour.
It's a break.
How many people come to your church, come to my church and say, church for me is just it's an hour for me to relax and exhale. Like I just need to exhale and just kind of put things down and just relax, right?
Why not just watch the TV program?
Versus what if your church is a forward operating base in enemy territory and that you're being shelled constantly? What about that? Well, then we're not coming to church because that's not what we come to church for.
I would say my experience is more, this is like boot camp or, buds or something, right? I mean, I'm putting you through the paces here and we're going to learn some strong, bold hymns that you maybe don't know. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to take time.
Right.
And this is not a 1 year, this is not a 1 month, this is not a 1 week project. This is an intense, we would use the words catechesis, discipline, learning. Habitus, so that you're prepared for whatever, fiery darts are thrown your way.
Do you think, thinking out loud about this, do you think that's why hymnody changed so much in the 1800s, in the 19th century?
No doubt.
away from more non-specific and like, militaristic type terms or just bold terms to more kind of generic, amazing Gracie, how great thou art, beautiful Savior. That musically they're very comforting, they're very calming because of the key signature and so forth. But the language itself is very non-specific.
Non-aggressive. Yeah.
Non-aggressive, yes.
Well, and I think that's it. What are you fighting?
Yeah. Yourself, actually.
Yeah, ultimately, because the state, for a good while there, was relatively passively engaged with the church. I mean, until the 20th century.
Yeah.
You had a little revolution at the end, but of the 19th century, but
right. Well, and here you go. Here's the capstone of this paragraph. Indeed, not too long ago, a man wrote a book recommending church attendance, primarily because it was good to do something that took little effort.
It's right there.
Convenience. The number of people that have quit attending church in the past year because it's inconvenient.
It's too much work.
It's too much work. Well, I would actually, and this is the point. I've had 10 to 20 people come to our congregation because they're just fed up with the COVID guidelines at their church, their previous church, or their church closed and never opened back up again.
Or their church doesn't provide them with that kind of intense discipline, focus, spiritual
100%.
meat, if you like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it doesn't, and I think the other thing is the temptation that we all have is to see crisis and then to flee the crisis and just act as if it's not happening. And it's this statement, right, to be, that we need a change of pace. So that's why, like, if we're engaging the thing that is really on people's mind, but if they're coming to church to avoid that thing,
right,
then the aggressive engagement of it is just amplifying what they're already the fatigue they're already feeling.
Right. Now, I will say this to add on to this because I think this needs to be qualified because I'm guilty of failing at this. I don't believe it's acceptable to just stop at what we just said. You must continue into, okay, but why did Jesus have to die for this? Like,
right.
How
there
Jesus
is rest and relief and change of pace,
right,
and confidence and hope in the forgiveness of sins. Yeah,
in Christ, right?
Yeah,
that it's not enough because you and I have talked about this. It's a very fine line. It's a very thin membrane that separates theology, Christian theology, from political theology. It's very easy, especially right now. We see this in the media, to cast all Trump voters as these apocalyptic, God and country, radical, whatever people, right?
Buffalo,
but to a certain
rainbow,
extent, since the early 80s and the Reagan administration, this has been true. That the evangelical church, Christians, have aligned themselves with one political party.
And have become a, what do they call it? Not just a party, like a constituency or a...
Sure.
I mean, imagine how many dissenting voices have joined together for the sake of whatever those priorities are.
Right.
Better to join.
Granted, if your party platform is that you're anti-abortion, I'm more than likely going to vote for you.
Right.
Because as a Christian, I'm kind of pro-life.
But they know that, and so they'll sabotage other things that aren't as high a priority for you, but are still, and like this is my okay, I never voted major party platform, and that trend has continued by virtue of the way the parties are acting now. Not to get too into it, I don't really care about the individuals so much as I care about the effect of their decisions and their rhetoric. Okay, so, but why do we have two parties?
Well, optics.
Well, we don't have two parties. We have a uniparty, right?
We have
the
one,
duopoly, as it's called. Right. And they collaborate and they work together. I mean, you have what is it? Schumer and McConnell are like they're just deciding they're just deciding what they want to do, what's going to be best for both of them. That's it. And you're like, is this in the best interest of the people who have elected you?
Well, we didn't. It turns out.
Well,
we know that now.
Well, that's a whole other thing. But I mean, just even in the end, it's like, are we serving you or are you serving us? This is a question.
Right.
And,
does the tail wag the dog or vice versa?
Right. And that's why when you mention party platforms and pro-life being one of them, is it possible that we could have a pro-life platform that wasn't also pro-war?
That'd be great. That'd be kind of cool.
I mean, actually, in a lot of respects, I mean, we're not pro-war. We know that sometimes it's necessary. That actually seems to be a pro-life position.
Yeah, you would think, right?
Yeah. Unnecessary death.
You can't kill. We're against killing the baby. However, if you've had your chance and you blew it, we're totally pro killing you later.
It's very odd. It's very odd, right? And so why just two parties? I mean, why not more?
George Carlin actually brings this up, that
parliamentary or something.
Have you noticed how many people that are pro-life are also pro-death penalty? Now, on the one hand, he's wrong because he doesn't understand the distinction between the two kingdoms.
Correct.
But on the other hand, politically speaking, I think he makes a lot of sense in his argument from the political standpoint of like, dude, you can't be like pro-life, but then at a certain point in life, you're like, yeah, you had your chance and you blew it, so we're going to kill you.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, that's a complicated subject, but
obviously, yes, of course. But just bringing up that it can spiral into absurdist conversation or just an absurdist platform. And it's very dangerous to say as a Christian, I think, anyways, my opinion is, it's very dangerous as a Christian to align yourself with a political party.
Right.
Because you might find yourself facing lions in the arena at some point.
As long as our Constitution greatly prefers majority rule, and it gives some deference to the minority, but not much. We're going to be in this problem.
Right. Well, because the Constitution was annihilated last month.
Well, there's that aspect of it, right? I like the idea that was presented with from Eric Weinstein, of the Articles of Unity is what he called it, where the winner becomes president for 2 years, the loser becomes vice president for 2 years, and then they flip after 2 years. Like,
can you imagine?
Can you imagine if they actually had
I texted you about that like a week ago, right? I was laying there in bed and all of a sudden I started flipping through all the vice presidents that conspired to destroy the president. Because again, for those of you who don't know, the guy that lost the election in the old days became the vice president. So your political opponent was essentially sitting next to you. There's a lot of vice presidents who worked in some instances to have the president assassinated so they could take over.
Yeah, well, there is that danger. But I mean, I've experienced this here in Wisconsin. I mean, it's the best form of government when you have, the various branches that balance each other out are on opposite sides of the ideological spectrum because they almost accomplish nothing, which is perfect.
I was going to say, as compared to Minnesota, where we have a one-party system, essentially.
I mean, it's a big waste of time and money. I get that.
Yeah.
But if it is absolutely essential, they get it done. If it's not really essential, and if it's just aligning with whatever ideology they follow, then they hit like a détente. They can't they can't go anywhere with it, and it just it dies on the floor, and it's fine.
Well, I think maybe at the root of what we're talking about is disenfranchisement, and recapturing that sense of disenfranchisement that Christians have known for most of their existence, the church, and likewise people, just in general. You go back to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, when they encounter the farmers in the field, the peasants in the field. Oh yeah, and he starts talking about the 33 to third.
Some watery tot, with a sword.
For most of Western history or most of history, under authoritarian regimes, the plebes were disenfranchised. We simply exist.
Yeah, as serfdom, right?
Yes, and I think we need to reorient ourselves once again to that mindset. I'm just saying, practically speaking, they don't care about you. They hate you and they think that you're stupid.
Well, why can't you do what you think is best for your family? They're like, well, but you might get punished or you might get fined or something. Like, okay.
Right.
Or just don't pay the fine.
Right.
Like, well, then they might throw you in prison. Yeah. And so what? Hire legal counsel. I mean, fight it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it matters, do it. If it doesn't matter, maybe let it go. But if it does matter, if you don't push back, you have nothing.
Nothing, exactly. Right. Well, and that's my point driving at is how many people have simply accepted their disenfranchisement as the status quo?
Right. So, and that's the argument for not having this conversation.
Right. What's the point?
We have church people interacting with communist theology is what we're arguing, which is the reason why we're interacting with it. It's not just an ideology; it's a theology.
Right.
Yeah.
There are some issues a man must be concerned with if he is to survive. To the point, he must learn to read. He must learn to write. He must learn elementary arithmetic. But there are so-called enrichment courses which he is free to take or leave. Communists believe that religion is not vital for modern men because it is a hangover from a superstitious and ignorant past. If the Pope has no battalions, Stalin said he is not to be taken seriously. Since Christ has not armor, communistic materialism says he can be ignored. You simply do not bring religion into the practical, important concerns of living in Russia, and this has invaded the churches of America. Yes.
I think we just said that. Yes.
Right.
Keep the politics out of the church.
Correct.
Well, then the church is can't engage with your politics either, right?
Right.
In other words, that vocation of citizen,
right?
The Bible has nothing to say about it.
Our friend Chad posted something about this the other day, that literally everything is political.
Everything's religious. No, he said
everything is religious. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Every aspect of your life has, I mean, we've talked about this, like even brushing your teeth is a religious experience.
Sure. In faith. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you keep doing it, even though,
right.
It's like, if you don't floss twice a day, you're like,
right.
What will happen? Well, it's actually not that predictive. It depends on actually things like, your calcium level and enamel strength and these things. But,
so let's frame this in a kind of generic sort of sense that going back to the four kind of tent pegs of communism: destroy history, destroy religion, destroy family, destroy economics, and then make the state all of those things. Right? The state is your family. The state is your God. The state is your bank. The state is your historian, your scholar. How many churches in America are not possessed of a knowledge of church history?
Right.
Don't preach about the family.
Nope.
And emphasize the vocation of family, especially fatherhood nowadays.
Sure. Absolutely.
Don't have any interaction with society in an economic sense. Talk about economics, talk about the state of society, taxation, for example, the fact that churches aren't taxed. And then lastly, God and Christ, specifically Christ versus civil religion.
Sure.
And that civil religion is heretical and demonic.
In every form?
Yeah.
I know we've struggled with this.
Because it's a perversion of Christ.
We've struggled with this because, I consider myself a non-patriotic person, at least.
Sure.
But I found myself becoming more patriotic. And the question is, just reflecting on myself, is that because I've learned to respect the gift that our country is, from God, which would be good,
right?
Or is it because I'm getting caught up in the religiousness of it,
right?
Yeah, and arguably behind a person, right? That's what you're talking about. There's there's a cult like following behind Trump. There isn't one behind Biden. It's just kind of ironic, right? It's a complete opposite there. I don't think that it's actually all that much.
Well, I think one person put it, you're either voting for a cult or you're voting for a cult of personality back in October-ish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
The way they kind of framed it. But, symbolically to emphasize or to illustrate your point, I will not allow the American flag to be up on the altar.
Sure.
Not near it, not even in the sanctuary. Like, it's out by the front door. Like, here's your vocation, go be a citizen. But you're not going to... No.
Ours is hidden behind a banner at the moment.
Right. But to your point then, I will not allow the American flag to be up on the altar. However, I would say that I'm intensely patriotic, more so than I've ever been in my life. Because I always associated patriotism with America first, rah, 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 love it or leave it, kind of born on the 4th of July kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Versus I think in the last 2 years especially, I've had to step back and reassess what that means because of, the Warrior Priest podcast too. And now all of a sudden I'm interfacing with veterans and law enforcement and other people and saying, okay, you're not a caricature anymore. You're not a stereotype. You're a human being. And I have access to you. So I can ask you questions. And of course, learning that people aren't one thing or the other. They're, multivariable personalities. They have different, nuances to their beliefs and their principles. But to say, this altar is the altar of Christ. This is the altar of God. And there's biblical precedent for not putting other things around the altar of God. There's one reason for this altar to be here.
Right.
Now, if we go outside of this, you're still an Israelite. You still got to live like an Israelite, but you have to live like an Israelite who is God's people. You don't get to be a Moabite. You don't get to be a Philistine. You don't get to be any of the Canaanite tribes.
They tried.
Oh, but they tried. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And so for me anyways,
They have their
don't put a
household
flag
gods,
on the
and then
altar.
they would have the tabernacle, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's my point. And to your point, then, the temptation I think is always there, right? To overlap, to confuse, to mix the two, and to say, well, I have my household gods of America, whatever that might mean, guns and stuff, and then I have Jesus. It's like that those figurines of Jesus with the gun and the American flag.
Yeah,
it's like a clear confusion of the two kingdoms. But it begs the question, like I said, because I have people that conceal and carry in church. Yeah. I welcome it, actually.
You don't put a metal detector out front and find them if they come in?
No, not here.
That's just the House of Representatives.
Right. But we had to have a conversation then around that topic then. Of in the state of Minnesota, most businesses don't allow firearms on the premises. You're not allowed to conceal and carry.
Right.
Period.
Right.
And most churches then, you're not allowed to conceal and carry in churches. Whereas after the Texas incident and several other incidents that went largely unreported by the media, there were people that went into churches and shot up churches. That's demonic.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you pass. Oh, the person had mental illness. Okay, but he was demonic. Whatever happened there, he was possessed of a demonic spirit. Period. You're discounting the larger picture here.
That's a mob mentality. Sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus I have former law enforcement and former military in my church. And I'm like, I hope you're concealing carrying, because if somebody comes into this church, I don't want my kids to get shot, or any of the kids in this church, or any of you. So feel free.
I saw multiple stories of different representatives like taking position. These were former military. Yeah. They're now taking position to protect people, ironically, who are on the other side of the aisle, right? Not ironically, actually. I mean, that's what noble service is, or virtuous service. It's like, I don't care who you are. Right. This is my duty. I still have that oath that I swore to, to protect you. And so whoever, you can cower in fear. I'm going to be the one who's going to stand here.
Right.
I don't even have a weapon. It's going to be hand to hand, but I'm going to do my best.
Right.
Or at least take the shot if I have to, which is incredible. That kind of courage. But I think it's courage. It is courage that's founded on a hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing that's probably the most disturbing about our current political climate, is that I think the goal, and this is a communistic goal, is to destroy that hopefulness that there is possibility for the Union to rebound. I guess it's not strong enough a term.
Well, my
resurrect
hope is that all of this will lead to a more perfect union.
Yeah.
I'm not hopeful about human nature.
No.
I'm not hopeful about our politicians or politics in general. I'm not hopeful for our society.
Or timeline.
What I'm hopeful for is, again, that ultimately Jesus is still risen. And that if this is happening to us, it's God's will that this happened to us for a reason. And I just don't know what that reason is, because he hasn't revealed to us.
Well, like COVID, I mean, we said it the least we can say, or maybe the most we can say, is that it's a call to repentance.
Yes.
And our confidence in medicine, our confidence in secular authorities, medical professionals.
Right.
I mean, obviously we know now that the wisdom of their actions it was all hope and prayer stuff.
Right.
They had no idea what. Didn't have a clue.
And now all that stuff that's been hacked and leaked, and how much of this has come from the Communist Chinese Party, it's amazing. It's just amazing.
I didn't look at the Pfizer leak. Is that widely available?
Yeah, it's available online. I'll send it to you.
Who's breaking it down?
Everybody who gets their hands on it. It essentially just says they just admit we have no idea if this actually stops the spread of COVID or not. We haven't done enough tests.
Well then.
Yeah.
So what was the number, the 96% effective number? What's that all about then?
That was the test vaccines they used, not the mass-produced vaccines for commercial use.
Oh.
Yeah.
We're not helping people.
Yeah. Hey, it changes your RNA. Do some research. Think.
Whatever that's about. Yeah.
Well, if it changes your RNA, that means it changes your DNA, which means you are a non-organic life form and you can be patented. Big picture.
Well, if they've listened this far, they can probably handle it. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just saying, look into it. I'm not saying that's the reason. I'm just saying that's certainly something that's been bandied about by more than one. Like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for example, has certainly talked extensively about this. This is somebody that I go to and listen to.
Yeah, I disagree on many things, but that. I mean, even the climate. I mean, I really appreciate his emphasis on environmental pollution, which is what got him started.
1969. If you want to do some research on climate change and what's happening now, go check out the Club of Rome, 1969. That's when this started.
Oh man, Alex Jones was right.
He was right again. I know. Again, it's just the delivery. He has to fix the delivery mechanism of this information.
Well, I was going to talk about this. So when we talked about the whitewash,
by the way, I haven't listened to Alex in a long time, so I'm not quoting Alex. I'm quoting
he talks
a whole bunch of other stuff.
The whitewashed tombs, but inwardly, are dead, or ravenous wolves, or whatever you want to say. It does seem to me that even people who are on so-called the good side, I guess, or trying to do their best, there's different sorts of characters,
right?
Because they know that communication's an odd duck, right? I mean, people respond to different kinds of communication. So Alex Jones is like the provocateur. Yeah, he's I like him to a televangelist.
Sure.
And does he exaggerate? 100%. Does he always speak the truth? I'm not so sure. Is he there? Is he close? Does he have an understanding? Sometimes, and that works for some people. I'm kind of a more like, just give me the data, break it down. Yep. I mean, the boring way. Yeah. I don't need the televangelist that gets me all fired up.
It's a hard sell, in my opinion, to the average pew sitter because it's so provocative.
What, the Alex Jones method?
Yeah, he's far too provocative, and it's not analytical. And I think for most people, including myself, I just like to be walked through the data. Walk me through the data so that I can explain it to other people too.
Right, but the point is, and what even the author's doing here is saying, if people are primarily religious, then they are persuaded not so much by data, by empirical research. They're persuaded by feeling.
Right.
So,
hey, did you see that Greta got in trouble?
Yeah. Thunberg?
That's so Thunberg got in trouble for tweeting out that stuff about how all this stuff is a big hoax, and she was just forced to say all these things by her handlers.
She's 18 now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, oops, off message. Find another 15-year-old girl. We got to get rid of this one. Yeah. Never pull back the curtain. Never show the wizard.
It kind of ruined the movie, didn't it, at the end?
Yeah, it really does.
I was like, this movie was a lot better when he was behind the curtain.
That's correct. So, Christ doesn't have any armor. He can't give you ice cream when you pray for it, according to Chairman Mao. Therefore, why are you wasting your time worshiping and praying to Jesus? He's just a figment of man's imagination. It's superstitious nonsense left over from the Middle Ages.
From their perspective, fine. If it makes you feel better, okay.
Right. It's an opiate.
Yeah.
So now, this is the subversion of our faith. One of those dedicated, passionate atheists was arguing with a minister one time, who, growing weary of the man's intensity, said, if God does not exist, it cannot be as important as you are making it. Yes. And the atheist answered him fiercely, can't you see it is terribly important? There is nothing more important. In that word, we have a judgment on our yielding to communism's propaganda that religion is just an extra.
Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
Why are they insisting that it's just extra?
Right.
Because they know it stands in their way.
Okay. Well, we again, going all the way back to the episodes on Nazis at Christmas time, right? Is like we have to destroy Christmas, but we can't destroy Christmas because it's sentimental and it's really important to people. But we have to destroy this because it's sentimental and super important to people.
Right.
So how do we hijack it? Likewise, in communist China, you can still celebrate Christmas. You just have to do it in the way that the state says you can.
Right. When you have to get rid of all the stuff that actually stands in the way of the state, like Jesus.
Correct. Right.
But as long as
Unless you preach a Chinese communist Jesus, which is what the churches in China preach.
Yeah. You can have all the extra stuff that makes you feel good as long as it doesn't get in the way. I was like,
correct.
To me, it's like, I don't know, watching the Mormon Tabernacle Choir sing Christmas hymns. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you do that? You don't even believe it. Well, it makes us feel
pretty.
Good. Yeah,
aesthetics.
Right. Well, it also sells tickets and albums and
makes a lot of money. Yeah.
It's pragmatic.
Yeah. I'm watching The Expanse. I told you about that.
Mm-hmm, right.
And what was really funny, I think we're on episode 3 now.
Of the first season?
Yeah.
Okay, I watched one episode. Should I give it a couple more tries?
It's one of those things that you have to give it time to get into it, and it's still grow. I think it's one of those shows by the end of the first season, you're either in or you're not.
I feel like
it just seems Channel, like it's a really... What's that?
It feels like Sci-Fi Channel to me.
Yeah,
just a little cheesy.
It is a little cheesy for sure, but it grows on me. It's growing on me.
Apparently
it's a slow burn, though. It's a real slow burn.
Yeah, apparently the show departs from the books. The books are worse, actually. Yeah. The show's better.
Okay.
I don't know.
Fair enough. I never read the book.
No.
But a Mormon shows up. And he invites this cop to comedy night. And I'm like, this is awesome. It's just awesome that they're like, let's throw a Mormon in here and have him proselytize people on the space station by inviting them to a comedy show.
In a far distant future, yeah.
Yeah, in a far distant future.
Well,
and he's wearing a white shirt with a black tie. It's fantastic.
Like, why would it stick around? Because it's a practical mythology, right? It's
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. There's nothing that's going to undermine it.
Right. It's malleable. So subversion of the faith. It's terribly important. Well, if you don't believe in God, why is it so important? Can we not see that if God does not exist, it is of ultimate significance? But if God does exist, I must forget all else and come to terms with that truth. The committed atheist is more religious than the uncommitted Christian. Speaking from personal experience, I can agree with that. It is blasphemy to say that I believe in God and then behave as if God does not matter. It is blasphemy to say that I believe in God and then behave as if God does not matter.
Just leave that there, right?
All right, I was going to say that is a dense sentence. There is no affirmation I can make that compared with the shattering importance of saying, I believe in God the Father Almighty. There you go. Exactly.
That changes everything.
It does. It's supposed to.
Right.
I would actually say what changes everything is the word Father.
Yeah.
All religions believe in an almighty God. But not all religions believe in an almighty Father.
I always point that out as we teach the Lord's Prayer,
Yeah.
That just there's only 2 or 3 examples in the Old Testament in the scriptures of God being called Father, and they're kind of weird.
Right.
And then you get the New Testament, and Jesus says, "Yeah, no, this is how you're to understand God now." And even with the parable-ish stuff about what father among you gives his son a scorpion if he asks for an egg. No, and so even earthly fathers, while as do good for their children, just now imagine this reality, right?
Right. Well, and also going with the All-Father in other religions, such as Norse religion, Odin is called the All-Father,
but not benevolent, right?
But not benevolent, exactly.
Yeah,
that he is the All-Father, but he is
the tyrant father almost.
He's kind of capricious. Yeah, like I've said before, you have to pray to Odin to give you victory in battle, but he may just abandon you.
Yeah, just hope he doesn't come home from work drunk, right?
Right, exactly. So exactly, he's not a benevolent father. He can be when he feels like it, but does that mean? See, this is the point, right? God is good. That statement, just God is good. Okay, but is he good all the time?
Right,
or is he only good when he feels like being good?
I love that word capricious. I mean, it means that he has more than one head.
Correct.
So it's like the what do they call them in Transformers? Tesserons. They're the 4 or 6 faced, godlike. In some storylines of the Transformers. This is really geeky. I'm sorry, guys. In some of the storylines, they are the ones that created the Autobots and Decepticons. But anyway. But they have multiple faces, and you just don't know which face you're going to see that day.
Correct. Right. So if God is...
Who is it? January. Janus, right?
Janus, yeah.
There's the 2 faces. Yeah.
2 faces. If God is, then his law is of the utmost consequence to me and to every man. I need to know how he operates and what he demands. Again, objective, baseline, I need an objective measure, the canon
reality,
here.
Right?
Yeah. I need to know how he operates and what he demands. Excuse me. Which, by the way, is how communists undo reality, is by changing the definition of words.
Or of reality, ultimately, right?
Ultimately, that's what you're trying to do, is deconstruct reality.
Up is down, whatever.
Right. Somebody asked me, as a Christian, do you believe there's only 2 genders? And I said, yeah. And they're like, how can you believe that? I'm like, well, actually, my Mexican dad's a doctor, and he explained it best to me. He said, chromosomes don't lie. There's only 2 sets of chromosomes. So you can say there's more than 2 genders, but chromosomes don't lie.
one is word games, and the other is biological reality.
Right. Yeah. One is objective reality. And one is you trying to change objective reality to suit what you want reality to be.
Well, and in a way, then, we haven't lost our sense of wonder. We like to reimagine ourselves.
Yes, sure. It's true. Yes. There we go. So you need objective law. You need an objective God, by the way. As we talk about, Jesus is the object of faith. You need something for faith to cling to that is outside of yourself.
And also, living, breathing person, walked on the earth.
Correct.
Historical guy, confirmed by witnesses, etc.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's blasphemy to say, I believe in God, but then I behave as if God doesn't matter, right? There has to be that affirmation that comes with the confession, I believe in God the Father Almighty. That affirmation comes through, there is a God, there is a law that is outside of your personal tastes, and how God operates and what he demands of you is also outside of your will.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, to his point, then, I had better learn of the framework within which I must live my life. What is more important than coming to terms with the way things are?
Well, apparently nothing, as long as you have Netflix and your groceries get delivered to your door.
Right, I was going to say, as long as I can scroll and I can eat out of a box, what more do I need?
Well, no, I learned today that the goal is that you'll be fed through a tube or something like that.
Ultimately.
Right, with your bug protein. Insect protein.
Bug protein and weeds.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like, really, it's on the website.
I know.
They put it on the website. We're going to have to eat weeds and eat bug protein to survive because it's not
this is the World Economic Forum, by the way.
Yeah. These people are spiritually deluded.
Well,
it's remarkable.
But you know, it's not them. It's not them.
I know it's not. I know
it's everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just when you get to the point where you actually believe that eating bug protein and weeds is the only option for the future of humanity, you're at Howard Hughes locked in a hotel room in Las Vegas levels of crazy.
That's true. Well,
you are so connected. You are so disconnected from objective reality at that point that you're just like, hey, how about this?
Right. Well, but it's a denial of the creation account, right? That
100%.
He made them good for food, right?
Yeah.
You looked at said this is good to eat, and you're like, well, it isn't anymore. Or even like in Acts, right, where the curtain comes down for Peter in the dream, and it's got all the living creatures on there, and they're like, you can eat any of it now.
Right.
Yeah, it is the omnivore dilemma. I get it. What do you eat if you can eat anything? But on the other hand, it's good. That's what God said about the food.
Something I was listening to last night, a doctor and researcher, is that, and he was arguing for medicine is that the original purpose of medicine was to figure out what had separated you from kind of homeostasis.
Oh, okay.
Right. That in our natural state, we are healthy. And that when we put things into our body that are not natural, so to speak, like it didn't grow out of the ground, it's been modified, it's a pollutant, whatever it might be, these are the things that make us ill. These are the things that promote disease and so forth. And that originally doctors, that's kind of their prognosis, or how they got to the prognosis was, okay, you're sick. We have to figure out what made you sick. And then we have to figure out how to eliminate that and then replace that so that we can get you back to homeostasis.
Leeches, other kinds of elimination diets, herbs.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Yeah.
But even going back to just like, hey, you've been eating this plant and it turns out that this plant is actually poisoning your liver. So we got to remove this from your diet, and then we got to figure out how to cleanse your liver. Like what other plant cleanses the liver, or what can we give you to cleanse your liver? We got to return you that homeostasis, versus modern medicine is actually what can we do to further separate you from what is your homeostatic state.
Ultimately, again, I keep using the word reality, but like when you have pain, as you've been experiencing, well, that pain is real.
Right.
But you can take things that convince your mind that the pain isn't happening and that your body isn't.
Even though it's still happening, it's just that your brain and isn't like, hey, nerve clusters, ignore that. Ignore that signal. We're going to pretend it's not there, versus your nerves are like, hey, there's a 4-alarm catastrophe happening down here. We need to do something about this. Like drop everything else you're doing. It's like I say, when I got to the hospital on Christmas Eve, my white blood cell count was 122,000. Normal is 10.
Right.
So the doctor just walked in and went, your white blood cell count's 122,000. And he was just calm, right? Just calm as the other side of the pillow. And I looked at him and went, that's not good. Like, that's not a, he's like, oh no, that's not a good number. We got to fix that. So we're going to start you on antibiotics. We're going to give you all this stuff. And then they gave me Dilaudid to just smooth off all the edges. But nobody said, hey, here's how we're going to address this in a way that returns you to that homeostatic, that state. Like, this is the problem, and we need to remove the problem or excise the problem so that your body can fix itself, heal itself.
We have a child that has a constipation issue. It's due to medicine, largely.
Dude, Miralax, really?
I know, exactly.
That stuff's nuts.
No, right. But in the conversation, I think the doctor who used to work in GI and now works in neurology.
Okay.
The one thing that she got right was this is going to take 3 months to get back to work on. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take discipline, basically to retrain, the whole GI system to do what it's supposed to do. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. But it is what you're talking about. It's homeostasis. And although she didn't advocate for natural solutions, she didn't say that was off the table. But
well, that's because we're now like, we're nuts. You and I are like, we're the hippie nut jobs. It's crazy.
I always was. Sorry.
Well, I mean, yes, but I'm just saying, it's like, okay, oregano oil, it cures urinary tract infections within like 48 hours. It's really great because it's antifungal, it's antibiotic, it's been used for thousands of years. It actually works.
Right.
And people are like, wait, so you're saying that rather than go to a doctor and get medicine for your UTI, you took oregano oil for 2 days? I'm like, yeah. Like, well, that doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, it does. Very effectively. It actually is antifungal, it's antibacterial, it's really good for treating these things.
Right.
Well, no, you need medicine. You have to go to a doctor. I'm like, no, I don't.
The antibiotic might work this time, but it won't then next time. That's the problem.
Right, sure. But that's what I'm saying is that we have gone so far in one direction that we can't course correct. And we can't say, there are certain things that I have to go to a doctor for sure. I'm not advocating for like drinking juice and then curing cancer. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we've, again, become so dependent on someone else to tell us, this is how we're going to fix you. This is how we're going to cure you. This is how we're going to heal you. Versus you don't even know how to do research in how to cure yourself.
Right. Exactly.
And therefore, by the time you get to, I have to go to the doctor. Yeah, you're around the bend. Like, you're so far gone. You're so toxic or whatever. It's going to take a very radical treatment to restore you to homeostasis. Because everything in your life is geared toward taking you further and further away from the way that God made you.
Right. Exactly.
This is the consequence of original sin that we don't talk about, or at least, kind of embrace holistically, that the consequences of original sin are much more far-reaching than just, I did a bad thing today.
Yeah.
I've literally taken the entire creation and turned it against myself.
It's incredible, but it's true.
It is. And so what we try and do then is fix what we did, which makes it worse. It's like I tell people, we know the difference between good and evil. We just don't have any control over it. To his point, is like, I need to learn the framework, the natural law within which I must live my life. This is the Stoic point. Like, the whole point of the Stoic teaching is get rid of everything, eliminate everything that is contrary to nature, natural law. That's the point of life. The point of life is to eliminate all of this stuff that has invaded your life and is not natural.
Ultimately, that you've put your hope and confidence in.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And determining whether something's a gift or a curse to you, it can be a little challenging.
Very, for sure.
Yeah.
What is more important than coming to terms with the way things are? I mean, it's so simple, but it's so terribly not easy.
As we've learned here, as all reality's been bent.
Yeah. Whatever I may want to say about God and his laws, let me not be so foolish as to say they are extras in the business of living.
That's a loaded paragraph. So good.
So loaded.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is why you can't live by the gospel as a Christian. You can't say that, I'm a Christian, I don't need the law anymore. One, it's a denial of original sin and the need to have the law to basically fence you in and protect other people and yourself from yourself. But it's just foolishness. Because the gospel is there to forgive your sin. It's to absolve you of your sin. It is to say, in Christ, you are forgiven. You are righteous.
Right.
But you're still in the flesh.
So I would say it this way. The Mosaic covenant, right? The giving of the law in Sinai, in regards to righteousness before God, its pedagogy, its tutoring is ceased, right, in the coming of Christ.
Right.
But it also still described reality of living in the flesh.
Yeah.
And so it still applies to the life of the flesh.
Right.
We've talked about that as far as how the new man, Christ, uses the law on our flesh, right? To discipline us, to direct us, and that's good. It's God pleasing. It's not. It doesn't lead us into heaven. It doesn't save us from our sin,
right? But it does save our neighbor
from our stupidity,
from us. Yes, exactly, and it saves us from ourselves.
It's true. It's true. Sin makes us stupid.
When people are like, "How come you're not afraid of dying?" It's like, dude, do you know how many times I've almost killed myself in my lifetime that I'm aware of? By the way,
you don't even know what you're asking. Yeah, right.
Yeah, no. Like, I've done so much to kill myself, and I'm still here. Yeah. Like, do you really think I'm scared of a cold? And like I said, that's just the stuff that I'm personally aware of that I did to almost kill myself. Right. Like the really remarkable mountaintop experiences where after the fact you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm not dead.
That's a good point.
And so what I'm saying is, without God's law there, I would be dead. Yeah, like it's just that simple.
Well, I mean, we argue about this. I mean, you can do it from both sides of it. You can say without God's gifts, you'd be dead, right? Without the sun shining, and
absolutely,
it would get pretty cold, pretty quick.
Yep.
Just like live through a solar eclipse, even a partial. It drops 30 degrees in just a matter of seconds.
Right.
Whoa! It has that much effect on you? Yeah, it does. Yeah, you need that burning ball of gas up there.
100%. Or just the fact that God gave my wife wisdom, medicinally speaking, to care for her dumb husband who was constantly injuring himself.
So, I mean, I think it's not just restraint, but it's the way that he orders all of creation for your benefit.
Good order. Good order. Not just order, good order. Which is why when things are not in good order, we recognize intuitively, this is not right. Like, there's something not right about this. This is not good order.
Well, that's what, we've been struggling to try to understand reality as we see it in our world at the moment. And I was having a conversation with another person who was like, I need to understand. I'm like, why are you're trying to find order in the midst of chaos?
Right.
Good luck. You're not going to find it.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's demonic. It's satanic. We're talking about destroying the order that God has given, whether it's family or state or whatever it is, right? Even just listening to good authorities, right?
Right.
Or faithful or devoted ones.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's reality destroying. It's chaotic. And so you're going to try to understand the meta narrative that's guiding this. You're talking about death and decay. Sorry.
No, I think it's beyond our comprehension.
Well, and like we talked about before we went on air, it's like, can you actually unravel the mystery of this? I don't know. I mean, what kind of like Pentagon Papers or some kind of commission is going to be able to explain? I mean, we can't even explain Vietnam.
No.
And there's so many
systematic 9/11.
Well, that's true too. And there's so many systematic failures layered on top of each other that you're like, or intentional or unintentional. We don't even know.
Right.
Like, we can't understand what happened. How did we get to this? Who knows?
Right. Trying to impose good order on the world. Again, knowing the difference between good and evil, but not having any control over it.
Well,
as I've said multiple times, right, is that there have been times when I've tried to do something good for somebody, or I have done something good for someone that I thought was good.
Right.
And then it just went sideways.
Yeah.
Where I ended up apologizing. Versus there's times I've said and done things I was like, okay, there's no coming back from that. Like, I ruined that relationship. And then the person comes to me after the fact, like, I am so grateful for what you did. I'm like, wait, what?
We've had that with sermons too, where we thought they were bombs.
Countless. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this is of the utmost concern for any man facing the real questions of his existence. If my life has meaning, it depends on religious assumptions. If I am an eternal creature, every immediate situation is affected. Whether or not I get a raise next year is not so important a question as what God is. Whether I fail or succeed in my ambition will not affect me nearly as much as what I decide about God. So let us have done with this communist doctrine that God is something we can take or leave. Let the churches recover the seriousness of their message and give no more comfort to the enemy by assuming that they are merely teachers of another philosophy.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's like a mic drop.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great tack to the criticism about relationship of church and state or politics and theology, and to say it's not just that we don't want politics in the church, but it's the other way around too. I mean, he's going at it from both angles. That the church, that the state is trying to tell the church what's important.
Yeah.
And we can't have that either.
No.
Right.
Apples and oranges.
Yeah. And I understand the thing, let politics be politics, but we pray, it's even in our catechism, right? That we pray for good government, for devoted and faithful rulers. Yeah. We actually pray for Christians in government. Yeah. Well, how's that going to happen unless we actually inform people how to be good citizens and how to take roles in government as they're provided to them?
At the end of our catechism, we actually have a table of duties that explain this. Like Luther didn't leave that to chance, because I think the genius of Luther is he recognizes implicitly, okay, we're done. I got to the end of the catechism. I'm done with the sacraments. What, do we go back to the 10 Commandments now? No, because you can't go from the Lord's Supper back to the law. There's got to be a stopgap.
Well, you see how the law is applied in the life of the Christian,
your Christian vocations.
The vocations by the apostles. Yeah.
Right. So that has to be there. We have to make sure that room in the house is maintained. It's not come to church and then go back to the world, as if the two are completely opposite.
But the world always drives you back into the church for the forgiveness of sins.
Yeah. Right.
Your vocational, intersection with anybody. It doesn't matter. Even your children, right? Or your spouse.
Absolutely.
It's going to drive you back to confessing and for the forgiveness of sins, back to the beginning.
So to wrap this up then, Florence Nightingale was a strong-minded young woman of good family. Not content to live uselessly, she became a nurse. When the Crimean War broke out, she learned that more men were dying in the hospitals than on the battlefield. Homeostasis. At the request of Sidney Herbert, Secretary at War, she went to Scutari with 38 nurses and began the organization of the hospital service. Sometimes she became impatient and critical, even of God. And she wrote one time, "I must remember that God is not my private secretary. God is not our employee, nor is he the creature of our convenience."
To wrap that, yeah. Isn't that something?
There it is, convenience.
I wish we called it the Department of War. That was such a better title.
Right? But it's still great because actually, again, my wife being a nurse, we have Florence Nightingale's book that she wrote.
I haven't read it.
It's fantastic because most of it has been scientifically proven to be true and effective in the treatment of someone who's sick.
You mean her old wives kind of
approach?
All
the crazy stuff that in the early 20th century are like, oh, well, we can ignore everything that she did because she's pre-modern.
Those are the people that gave us processed cheese and meats, though.
Yeah, they also used iridium for glow-in-the-dark watches. So
I love that watch.
I'm sorry,
that was a great watch.
Yeah, other than it gave all the, anyways. But the point is that one of the things, very simple, she's like, you can't keep people inside closed up breathing old air. It's actually bad for you. We need to open all the windows and we need to air out the house in order for people to recover more quickly. And you're like, wait, so you're saying that locking people inside without access to fresh air and sunshine is bad for you? And you knew this in the 19th century?
It is intuitive. Well, if you're from a godly perspective, right? That God gives sun, air. I mean, these are gifts and they're meant to be used and received.
Homeostasis.
And even something like hydration, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We know you can't live without water, but then we act like we don't need it.
Well, one of us on this podcast has been living the last year as if he didn't need more water. Apparently dehydration leads to kidney stones too. And
was that the prognosis?
No, but it's definitely there, talking with my urologist, just because my training regimen and how it ramped up continuously throughout the year. And I wasn't taking seriously enough that I need 40 ounces of water a day, essentially going through me. I need salt. I need lemon or lime.
40? I would have thought it would have been like 3 times that.
2 of these plus all the other stuff I drink. So this is like 20 some ounces. So I need 2 of these a day with lemon and salt in it. And
so that's only like
tea
an ounce for every 10 pounds of body weight? Is that
something like that? I don't know.
Okay.
But I'm burning like 4,000+ calories a day, usually when I train. So, which is 6 days a week. So that's probably a part of it, was the stress that I put on my kidney, because the other side effect is with all the vitamins and supplements I take, without proper hydration, that stuff's just sitting there in my kidneys.
Right.
Calcifying, possibly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's like the water heater that rusts out at the bottom because you never use it, as we learned across the street this week.
Exactly.
All those minerals just sit there. Yep.
All these things that we talk about all the time that we're just like, yeah, it's just life, man. Actually, it's not. It's old Adam life. We need to qualify that. Mm-hmm. All the stuff that we're talking about that is, it's just part of life. No, it's actually a part of original sin. Jesus is life, big L life. And we need to make sure that as Christians, to your point, what you just made, it's not enough to say it's just part of life. Well, which one though? The life that we live in Christ or the life that we live in sin?
Right.
Because they're not the same.
Well, I was saying this other thing. I mean, it's like you only have so much energy and time. I get that. Mm-hmm. And so you have to prioritize and execute upon those things.
Sure.
But you also have to be critical that maybe your priorities are out of whack. And there is something, for the sake of your family, for your country, for your neighbor, that you need to engage in immediately today.
Right.
And other priorities have to take a back seat because it's the most important thing today. And
right.
Do you always, you don't have the opportunity to know both. You don't have the opportunity to know the future, right? Of all things. And we know eventually, but what is this actually going to do today? You can reflect on the past, but what I found is like, what do we do too often? We just keep repeating the same thing, thinking we're going to get it better. We're going to do it better this time. Communism is one of those.
Right.
We're just going to keep trying this, and we're going to try, but we're going to manipulate. We're going to use new tools, etc.
Right.
And maybe adjust a little bit. It's like maybe it effectively, functionally at its core is faulty, and it's not possible. How
many, obviously murdering 100 million plus people isn't enough to convince people that socialism, communism doesn't work. So do we have to kill a couple of billion first before people are like, okay, fine,
Yeah. We'll find out. Right.
Yeah, we are going to find out. That's a sad reality of what's happening right now is we're going to find out because
we don't even know the death
people
totals
are going to die
from
China?
Many countries. China in particular. Yeah.
Well, even in this country, actually, because they've lied about death certificates to the extent that we'll never know. They've falsified death certificates. I know in my state, they falsified death certificates. They've been trying to cover that up since last spring.
Yeah, the nursing home deaths, another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that is your new normal, by the way, for everybody talking about the new normal. This is your new normal. Communism is the new normal now. Death, undocumented death is the new normal.
But wasn't it kind of already?
Already the new normal, exactly. See, the new boss, same as the old boss? Yeah.
Well, it's just here now it's revealed to you.
Right. Hopefully. Because once it's revealed, now you kind of have to address the elephant in the room.
Well, the argument is that if it's revealed late enough that you can't reverse course, then it's okay, right? I mean, from the perspective of the people trying to make the change.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, yeah, good luck changing it now.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the horse is out of the barn. So then another sign of communistic infiltration, this is a setup for next couple episodes. Another sign of communistic infiltration is the assumption that propaganda is more important than truth.
Oh, how relevant is that?
1960. 1960.
Wow. Nothing new under the sun. Solomon was right. I like that Solomon guy part, that part of it anyway.
Yeah, could I have wisdom that I'm then going to abuse? So next episode, if you've made it this far, God bless you. We'll give you a special dispensation, some special Band of Books bucks.
I do encourage you. I mean, you're free to watch in real time, but I'd encourage you to watch on like 1.5 speed or 2 times speed, or listen.
Sure,
it's fine. If you can get through it and you don't mind. Well, there's plenty of dead air. You can get through it in 40 minutes. That's fine.
I like how you unadvertise our podcast.
Oh, I don't listen to anything in real time. No, I don't listen to anything in real time.
I know you don't.
Yeah, I don't have time for that.
We never really talk about the church and propaganda.
We're going to talk about it next time.
But we're going to talk about it next time.
I think we need to.
That'll be fun.
I think we need to. Yeah, that applies.
For sure. So thank you so very much for sticking with us the past 2 years now. Have we been doing this 2 years? 2+?
I don't even know.
I guess.
Sure. 2.5. 2.5.
2.5. But thank you so much for, indulging us. Because, the fact that you're with us, I think says a lot more about you than it does about us, though.
Thanks for the feedback, too.
Right.
Positive and negative.
Feedback. Yeah, thank you. Welcome to the island of broken toys, and enjoy your stay. But again, at the end of all of this is still the one simple fact that Jesus is still risen.
That's
and
true.
He's coming again to judge both the living and the dead, and He will give to us and all believers in Jesus Christ eternal life. That is our hope. That is our only certain hope, and is the source of our humility and our courage. And so don't be afraid to speak the truth. Don't be afraid to stand up for the faith, and don't be afraid to love and be charitable and be kind, but also to be stern and to hold the line, hold fast
to what matters. Yeah.
So we'll talk to you again real soon. Peace.
I don't know if your internet or mine was worse.